Kyle Shanahan spoke last night at the Dwight Clark Legacy event and had some very positive things to say about Trey Lance. He also has some positive things to say about Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold, and I'll get to them soon. But what he said about Trey Lance was what I would call news. Two things he said why he's optimistic about Trey Lance this offseason. One, he said that the finger that Trey Lance broke his rookie year essentially affected him for a whole year, and he couldn't throw with a bent index finger at all. So that was completely hindering his ability to play and improve his throwing mechanics. He was all messed up. So that's not an issue anymore. Second, Kyle Shanahan said is that Trey Lance really cleaned up his base in the last 2 months. Remember, he was working with a new quarterback coach. He was working with Patrick Mahomes. That's very interesting because I have pinpointed with Trey Lance that his issues are his base. The way he uses his legs, they really hinder his throwing. They get in the way. He locks his front leg. I've said it a million times before he releases the ball. When you lock your front leg, that pretty much is throwing on the brakes, stopping momentum, and it puts stress on your arm, and it leads to arm fatigue and eventually injury, and it definitely leads to inaccuracy. So he's working with Patrick Mahomes. He's cleaned up his base. Kyle Shanahan is very excited because Kyle can't teach that. It's got to be one of these independent coaches. And so what I'm looking for with Mahomes, he's very interesting the way he throws. Lance is different. Lance is much more traditional, over-the-top trained. Mahomes is very natural and free. And what he does is he keeps his weight back on his back foot. He doesn't have a large stride forward. I don't think he strides at all. Weight back. He has a hip rotation. He keeps his front leg bent upon release of the ball. And he has a very low 3/4 release where he gets a full extension of his arm when he releases the ball. You see Josh Allen throw like that too. If that's how Trey Lance is throwing, that's big for him. He'll be much, much better because he is like an arm thrower. Or the first 2 years of his career, he was an arm thrower. You could almost hear him grunt when he threw the ball. It looked painful how he was throwing. Mahomes he has such flow throughout his whole body, and it doesn't look pain. It looks like he could do it all day. It looks like he's throwing pillows around the field. And yet he has a freaking cannon. He could throw the ball 70, 80 yards. So that's what I'm looking for from Trey Lance when I get to OTAs. And apparently that's what the Niners are looking for too. And that's what they're encouraged about right now. They don't need to wait until 7-on-7 and 11-on-11s to see how Lance is throwing the ball, because that's what's going to make or break his career, how he throws the ball. He's a mature guy. He manages games pretty well. I mean, Sam Darnold, they're trying to turn him into a game manager. He's not a franchise quarterback. The reason they got Trey is because he has the ability to be a franchise quarterback if he cleans up his mechanics, his base. And what Kyle says is so far, so good. He's cleared the first hurdle, and they're encouraged. You should be encouraged as well because they're not trading him. They're not getting anything for him. He's going to be on the team the next 2 years and either be their franchise quarterback and get an extension or walk. And of all the guys they have, I still feel he has the best chance to be a franchise quarterback. Sam Darnold is here because he could be a nice backup that they could win with. And maybe he could be a game manager that they could win with. But he's not. The day that Sam Darnold wins a Super Bowl, come on, let's be realistic. And then Brock Purdy, sure, he had a great start to his career, but he also had a really serious injury. You can't put all your eggs in his basket either. You brought in Trey Lance for a reason. If he makes the strides you wanted him to make, he just turned 23 years old. It's fair being optimistic. What did they say about the other quarterbacks? They said that Kyle said that Brock Purdy is on the field with the other quarterbacks, not throwing a football, but going through the same drills while holding a towel and sort of throwing while holding a towel, not as heavy. So they expect he'll be out there if there's no setbacks for training camp, but I don't know what out there means. Does that mean doing everything, competing, or still being out there with a towel or throwing on a side field like Jimmy Garoppolo did last? I have no idea what it means. Does it mean that he'll be competing for a starting job with Trey Lance? Don't know. Also with Sam Darnold, Kyle Shanahan was asked about what Matt Mayoko said about Sam Darnold being like the most gifted thrower the Niners have ever had, and he essentially said it wasn't that wild of a thing to say, which tells you right away where Matt Mayoko got that from, I think. So, hey, God loves Sam Darnold, Matt Mayoko, and Kyle Shanahan, but I don't read Kyle saying that about Darnold as him thinking Darnold's going to start. Remember, they could have brought in anyone in the free agent market, anyone in the draft. They chose Darnold over everyone to be a sort of safety net backup plan in case Trey Lance falls on his face or gets injured, which he's gotten injured a lot. So why Darnold? Well, you got to say something nice about him. What are you going to say? We gave him $3.5 million guaranteed with the the option to make up to $11 million if he plays and plays well because we think he stinks. No, he was the best option. There was no one in the draft we wanted more than Darnold. There was no one in free agency we wanted more than Darnold. There are these reasons why we feel, if given the opportunity, he could become a winning player with us. Of course you say stuff like that. It doesn't mean that you all of a sudden are more invested in him than Trey Lance. And I think a lot of people assumed that the 49ers were 100% out on Trey Lance because they were taking calls on him, which didn't go anywhere because some certain national reporters were speculating about what they were going to do, like they had any information. Clearly, Kyle Shanahan's keeping this one close to the vest. It's a lot like the Mac Jones situation 22 years ago when he traded up and no one knew who he was going to pick. He's like Aaron Rodgers in that way. He's not trying to do business with the insiders. Rodgers didn't want Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport to break the story of where he was going to go. He wanted to break that story. I think Kyle Shanahan doesn't necessarily want Ian Rappaport and Adam Schefter and Tom Pelissero to sort of speak for him on this issue. This is his secret, the Trey Lance thing. And if it doesn't work out, here's the thing with Kyle. I'm trying to think like Kyle because I think we have a lot in common. Would Kyle rather stick with Trey and give Trey more opportunities and make it clear to the whole world that Trey was given a fair shot and he failed or he succeeded, but it was on him? Would he rather that, or would he rather get rid of him now and take the risk that he could succeed somewhere else? Seems to me, if you're Kyle Shanahan, from Kyle's perspective, you give Trey Lance 4 years to show something. If you never show anything, you could say, look, man, I put the best team around him. I gave him 4 years. I gave him every opportunity. I gave him the best circumstances. He couldn't do it. I misevaluated him. It's on me. It's on him. You can live with that. A lot of good coaches make bad evaluations. What you can't live with is if you draft him, you don't give him an opportunity, he gets hurt, he doesn't fail, you trade him anyway because you thought you had something in someone else, he goes somewhere else and a better coach than you turns him into what you thought you could turn him into originally. That's something you never live down. That's something that makes people in the league think, is he really an offensive genius? Is he just a scheme guy? All those things come up. So from Kyle's perspective, that can't happen. I do not believe he's going to get rid of Trey Lance. I think he's going to be here for a couple more years, and nothing would make Kyle look like a bigger genius than pulling it off with Trey after the entire world wrote him off. So it's interesting to hear Kyle say this himself. And remember, I said yesterday that I'd heard from a reliable source that the Niners were very pleased with their first impression of Trey Lance in this offseason. And remember, I speculated before then that the reason Ian Rappaport got pushed back when he did about him saying Sam Darnold's going to start week 1 is that the Niners saw Trey Lance and were pleased. Remember, they didn't really see him throwing. He was off with his own guy in Dallas with Mahomes. They needed to see what it looked like. And what Kyle said is the last 2 months really did wonders for Trey Lance's base, his lower half when he throws, his footwork. They needed to see. It was diagnostic. That was a make-or-break throwing session, learning session for Trey this offseason. It was a make-or-break offseason, and so far, they like what they've seen, and that's why I think they're pushing back. So this is really important. This is 3 different indications that Trey Lance's stock is up. Now, to keep it in perspective, we've heard glowing reports of Trey Lance in May before. So it's going to be on him to keep it going, to make sure he doesn't have arm fatigue, to not get hurt. The way I really look at this is the only way he's not the starter week 1 is if Brock Purdy makes a miraculous comeback, which he could, or Trey Lance falls in his face and or gets injured. Because he got injured in preseason. He broke his finger in the preseason. He's injured his knee. He's injured his ankle. He's never played 3 games in a row. So it's on him to a degree to keep himself injury-free. It's on the Niners also to protect him. So good news so far from Trey Lance. Let's see what happens next. OTAs in 2 weeks. At least with the media there, I'll be there, and I'll give you my impression of his throwing.